What's up everybody, I'm Derek, this is Rocking eForge, and today I'm finally getting into part 2 of my Submarine Sanmai knife build. Now for those of you with small attention spans, here's the knife. As you can probably tell, that knife is finished, so what you have to look forward to in this video is heat treating, grinding, and affixing the handle to the blade itself. Now I did intend for this video to be the conclusion of this series, but if you are interested in seeing how I make a leather sheath for this knife, please drop a comment down below and I will consider making a video for it. Now without any further ado, let's get rocking. What I've done here is I've got a thermocouple measuring the temperature at a certain point inside that square tubing. That square tubing is kind of minimizing the effects of having the pinpoint heat from the burners and trying to spread that out a bit more. And I've got my forge ramped down about as far as I can get it without it dying. Now the point that I've got the thermocouple, the tip of the thermocouple is sitting right about 1650 Fahrenheit, and that's the temperature I need to hold my knife blade at for about 10 to 15 minutes for the first normalizing cycle. One, I'm going to let this heat up real slow. I don't want to thermally shock the blade by heating it up too fast, because that could cause cracks. Now unfortunately, the point that I've got the thermocouple is one single point. So as I heat this blade up, in order to maintain it about 1650, I've got to kind of pass the length of the blade back and forth into and out of the hotter spots. I'm not going to make you stare at my forge for the next 45 minutes, so I'm going to do these normalizing cycles and I'm going to come back in a second. Well, about 2 minutes into my soak period, my thermocouple failed hard. It was bouncing back and forth between 1,000 degrees, 15, 1700, all over the place every second. So I'm going back to winging it and doing everything by eye. So I just finished my 10-minute soak window at about 1650, and I'm letting it cool down to a black heat, and I'm gonna do another one at about 1500. But yeah, the thermocouple breaking kind of threw a wrench in all of my plans today. So here's where midway through the second thermocycle, I remember I forgot to touch mark. So we're just gonna nice and calmly do that here. Okay, so I'm just in the process of heating up my quench oil. I'm just getting a bar of mild steel up to an orange heat. I'm letting the knife warm slowly close to the mouth of the forge back to a reasonable temperature. The quench temperature for 1095 is about 1450 to 1475 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to take it to non-magnetic and then a little bit hotter. That's why I have a magnet here, and let it soak at that temperature for about 5 minutes. The goal is to get to the point where the steel is no longer magnetic, and then a little bit hotter, and then I will quench in a preheated mineral oil. While mineral oil isn't the best, I had a gallon of mineral oil hanging around from forever ago and decided I was going to use it for this knife since it's close to Parks 50. It's a little more of a medium quenchant as opposed to a fast, but it should do the trick and give me a decent hardness on this blade. Now I've got my tube in there just to, if it strikes my fancy, to put it in that and let it kind of soak a little bit. I'm going to run it in and out of the forge. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but the tip starting to glow. Getting this even along the blade is going to be the biggest challenge, because the tip is not only the thinnest point, but also the point that spends the most time in the heat. So trying not to overheat the tip is one of the critical parts of this process. Now I could flip it around and heat the tang first to try to even out that heat. Even with a glove on, my hands, my closer hand is pretty hot right now. See, the tang is starting to glow a dull red. I'm going to quench edge first, which is why I have kind of an odd looking grip on this blade, because I want to make sure the edge hits the quench and hardens, and I don't really mind if the rest of the knife doesn't harden. Alright, so that looks a little too hot to me on that tip. I really don't know how the colors come out. On camera here, and I'm going to check to see it is still magnetic. So we got a little ways to go yet. Alright, so the tip is non-magnetic, but trying to get this heated up all to the same temperature is tough. We're going to transition into using the tube because it gives a more even heat than right in the middle of that flame. I'm just running it, going to continue running it in and out of the tube here. That's looking a little hot, but the fact that the whole blade is that color is acceptable. So here we go. Ooh, I don't like all of those crackles. Things look pretty darn straight. I'm hoping that all those crackles that I heard were just the forge scale crackling and coming off, and that there's no crazy cracks or separations in the forge welds. So let's get this cleaned up and in the tempering oven. That other piece of steel is just a test piece, don't worry about that. But the one in the back is the knife in the tempering oven, 400 degrees. You can't read that because it's blurry. 400 degrees is going to be 2 hours. And we're going to do that again. So in the meantime, I'm going to forge out some other stuff. So it's a little while later. This knife is all heat treated up and fully tempered. So I'm going to jump to the belt grinder and do all the grinding I need to on this knife, and then start looking at handle material. Unfortunately, my ability to grind bevels is not very consistent between the sides. The bevel on this side isn't quite as stark as the bevel on this side. That just speaks to how few knives I usually make. It's all good though. We're going to start the polishing process, and I'm not going to make you watch me do a bunch of extra grinding. So a few shots during the polishing process, but nothing too crazy. Alright, so this thing is all etched up and looking really, really nice. There is a slight difference between the 1095 core and the HY80 on the blade, and there's a nice shiny line that appears between the two steels that makes for a nice little contrast. So I'm very happy with the way it's turned out. The next step now is to put a handle on this thing, and I, after much deliberation and considerations on all of the pieces of wood that I've got sitting around the shop, I finally settled on a couple pieces of zebra wood. Now that I've switched to this view, you can definitely see the nice little shiny line between the two different types of steel. The backside of the blade had some blotches, some spots where the 1095 core peeked through the HY80 as I ground it away, probably due to some errant hammer blows in the forging process. You can see the piece of zebra wood behind it. I think this is going to give a really nice contrast between the darkened steel and the pretty light colored zebra wood. And I think all in all, it's going to give it a really nice look. I'm going to tie everything together with some brass pins, and this is probably going to be going into a nice buckskin color sheath to nicely complement the lighter tones in the zebra wood. I think once this is all sanded up real nice and has a nice coating of boiled linseed oil, this is going to look phenomenal. It's always the most stress-inducing part of knife projects is getting the handles lined up flawlessly. Because if you tweak even one thing, you got to start all over again. Winging it. Okay, so I'm going to shape this on the tang. It sure ended up wonky, but it's going to work out fine. So I'm going to get some epoxy going, and I'm going to glue this thing to the tang, and this wood seems pretty soft, so shaping I don't think is going to be a major problem. Somehow, some way, at least looking at that angle and these angles, the lines actually ended up pretty well straight on with each other. I'm going to do a quick cleaning here of the tang with the rubbing alcohol. Make sure there's no oils or anything on the tang before I start trying to glue this up. I'll just be using some 5-minute epoxy. It's what I've got lying around. Probably not the most ideal stuff, but it'll work. This is a 2-part epoxy. That was the resin. I'll come in with a roughly equivalent sized dollop of the hardener. And time starts now. It smells like movie theater popcorn, weirdly. Now my hands are coated in epoxy. Everything's looking like it's lining up fine. All right, so that's gonna set and cure. I'm using 5-minute epoxy, so I guess I can start working on the handle pretty much right away. I've just got some boiled linseed oil here, and I'm going to soak the knife handle in it to infuse it into the wood and give it a nice coating. So I'm going to leave this in the linseed oil for a while, and we'll come back and check on it later. Now that's going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, drop a comment, hit subscribe, ring that notification bell. If you want to support me and the channel further, please consider becoming an honorary striker on my Patreon. Link is in the description below the video, and keep on rocking.